Daniel shrugged. Not according to the county. This is all official. I remember when Eli's granddad bought up most of this forest back in the 50s. Didn't want it turned into a logging road. Figured nature deserved a protector. Karen's mouth opened and closed a few times, no sound coming out. She looked like someone had unplugged her mid-tantrum. Then her voice returned, louder, shriller. Well, that can't be legal. You can't just tell me my house is on someone else's land. There has to be a mistake. Daniels took off his sunglasses and looked her dead in the eye. I don't make the maps, ma'am. But I do enforce the law. And what you're doing here, trespassing, vandalism, destruction of property, it doesn't look good. You keep poking the bear, it's gonna poke back. Karen sputtered, red-faced and suddenly without her usual fire. She turned on her heel, yanked her dog along by the leash, and stomped off back toward her cabin, muttering something about lawyers and conspiracies. Daniels waited until she was out of earshot before turning back to us. She's a handful, he said with a smirk. But looks like you've got your ducks in a row. You boys let me know if she tries anything else. And keep the fires small, yeah? We nodded, and he tipped his hat again before walking back to his SUV and disappearing down the dirt trail. Connor let out a long whistle. Did that just happen? Did we finally win a round? I grinned. Feels like it. But I don't trust her to take a loss quietly. Connor shook his head. She'll come back with a bazooka and a PowerPoint presentation. As it turned out, he wasn't far off. That afternoon, Nate arrived. This time not just as a cousin, but as legal backup. He wore a crisp button-down shirt tucked into jeans, sunglasses on, briefcase in hand. The only thing missing was a theme song playing behind him. He walked into the clearing like he was preparing for court in the wilderness. I heard the sheriff was here, he said, grinning. Let me guess. Karen brought the apocalypse? More like brought a dog in a vest and an attitude, Connor said. Nate laughed, then pulled out a stack of envelopes and papers. Good. Then it's time we take this up a notch. He had drafted a cease and desist letter, a formal notice that Karen's cabin was encroaching on our property, and a legal demand that she remove all her structures, or begin negotiations to purchase the land she was occupying at a price determined by us. And since she had already vandalized our camp, we also had the right to press charges or sue for damages. Nate said we'd hold off for now. But he wanted her to feel the pressure. We walked down the path to the property edge, where Karen's cabin stood like a crooked little fortress with gnome statues lining the porch like sentries. Nate knocked on the door. Karen opened it, eyes narrow, jaw clenched. What now? She snapped. Nate held out the envelope. Formal notice. You're squatting on private land. You've got 30 days to either vacate or make us an offer. Karen snatched the envelope like it had insulted her personally, scanned the top few lines, and scoffed. You think you can intimidate me with paperwork? This is my home. I'm not going anywhere. That's fine, Nate said coolly. Then every day you stay becomes a legal liability. You can fight it in court if you want, but you'll lose. And it'll cost you a lot more than you think. Karen slammed the door in his face. We walked back to camp, and for a while, everything was quiet, peaceful, even. For the first time since we arrived, it felt like maybe, just maybe, this battle was turning in our favor. Nate stayed for dinner, and the sheriff even returned with a six-pack and a camp chair, saying he was off-duty and tired of small-town drama. We all sat around the fire that night, laughing, eating, swapping old stories, and savoring the slow burn of a well-earned win. But none of us were naive enough to believe it was over. Not with Karen. If we'd learned anything, it was that she didn't just lose quietly. And as we'd soon find out, her next move wasn't just angry, it was wildly public. The calm didn't last. We were finally starting to relax, thinking maybe Karen had realized she was beat, maybe she'd gone inside to Google how to gracefully admit defeat. But by the next morning, we realized that wasn't her style. Karen didn't retreat. She reloaded. The first sign was the flyer. It was pinned to a pine tree just off the trail that led toward the road. At first glance, it looked like some sort of event notice: bright red letters, clip art of trees, and bold text that read Community Forest Preservation Barbecue, stand against illegal occupation. Beneath that, it said, hosted by concerned citizens, protecting OUR land. Connor tore it down, laughing. Oh, she's throwing a protest? In the middle of the woods. I read the fine print. It was scheduled for Saturday. She was inviting people to raise awareness of illegal activity, unregulated development, and environmental abuse by squatters currently camping on conservation land. She even had a note about bringing your own reusable cutlery to minimize environmental damage, as if she was fighting for the Amazon rainforest and not trying to get revenge because we wouldn't pack up and leave our own forest. I looked at Connor and shook my head. She's throwing a fake protest on land she doesn't own, about people who do own it. That's next level. The day came faster than expected. Saturday morning rolled around, and it started with a slow stream of unfamiliar cars parking near the trailhead. Some folks wandered in carrying picnic baskets, reusable water bottles, and folding chairs. Most looked confused, like they thought they were arriving at a church potluck, but had taken a wrong turn into a conspiracy theory meeting. A few had matching shirts that read, "Save the Trees." One guy had binoculars and a notebook, and kept asking if we'd seen any eagles nearby. Karen arrived at noon, in full force. She had a whistle, a megaphone, and a vest that said Event Coordinator. The dog was now in a wagon with a tiny umbrella attached. She set up a folding table covered in pamphlets, clipboards for signatures, and a sign that read Petition to Reclaim Community Land. It was so absurd, so completely disconnected from reality, that Connor stood there, mouth open, holding a stick of beef jerky like he'd forgotten what food was. "You think she'd notice the irony?" he mumbled. It didn't stop there. Karen gave a speech. Into the megaphone. Loud and proud, like she was announcing a revolution. "We will not be bullied off land that belongs to the people," she shouted to the dozen or so confused attendees. "This sacred forest has been walked by our ancestors, enjoyed by children, respected by neighbors. And now? It's being defiled by squatters with fake documents and outdoor grills." That part earned a few claps, but then Nate stepped in. He walked up to the table, grabbed a flyer, read it with a raised eyebrow, then turned to the group and said, "Hey everyone, just so you know, I'm the legal representative for the landowners she's talking about. This entire forest, including the space you're standing on, is privately owned. By our family. We have the deed, county approval, and full rights to be here." A few people looked around awkwardly. One woman slowly lowered her protest sign. A man holding a compostable plate of pasta salad squinted at Karen like he was doing the math in his head and realizing he might be on the wrong team. Karen's face twisted. "This is a disinformation campaign. They're frauds. They tricked the county with fake maps." Nate pulled out the land deed, handed a copy to the nearest person, and said, "You're welcome to verify it yourself. I'd also recommend not trespassing here again once this little picnic is over." "Thanks." Karen shrieked, actually shrieked, and tried to snatch the deed back from the woman reading it. But the woman yanked it away, muttered something about not liking being lied to, and walked off with her pasta salad. Within 10 minutes, most of the crowd had awkwardly dispersed, mumbling thanks or apologies as they slipped away into the woods. Karen, left with only her dog and her folding table, stood there shaking. Her voice was hoarse from yelling into the megaphone. Her grand protest had collapsed like a sad balloon, and she looked ready to combust. But she didn't lash out this time. She just packed up quietly, eyes cold, and pushed her wagon dog back toward the trail like a general retreating after a failed siege. That night, back at camp, we finally exhaled. For the first time, it felt like maybe she was done. We sat by the fire, drinking beer and laughing about the man with the eagle notebook. Nate had already posted clips of her speech online, and within hours, It was spreading like wildfire across local Facebook group. The caption: Local Karen tries to reclaim forest, accidentally hosts barbecue on someone else's land. The comments were ruthless. One guy wrote, "Next time she should protest at Costco and demand ownership of aisle 12. Another said, "The forest said no, Karen. We thought the worst was over." But the next day, we went on a short hike and stumbled across something none of us expected. About a quarter-mile from our camp, just off the main trail, we found a half-buried steel hatch camouflaged beneath an old tree stump. It looked like something out of a Cold War bunker movie. Rusty, covered in moss, but solid. Connor looked at me. "Is that what I think it is?" Nate knelt down, pried it open, and shined his flashlight into the dark space below. Wooden stairs, crate, a metal cot, a few sealed boxes, and on the wall, an old family crest burned into a wooden plaque. We climbed down, dust swirling around us, until we reached the bottom. It was like stepping back in time. Shelves lined with canned food, tools, and documents wrapped in oilcloth. One box held old maps and letters, handwritten in my grandfather's script. Among them, a document marked Land Stewardship Clause, Emergency Protocol. Nate read it, eyes wide. This says that if any non-authorized structure or inhabitant is discovered squatting on the land, and if notice is given and ignored, the owners have legal grounds to issue daily fines, up to $100 per day, after 30 days of noncompliance. I laugh. Grandpa put in a squatter clause? Connor grinned. Looks like the forest really does protect itself. We took the document back to camp and laminated it. Again. We were going to build something next. Not just another warning sign. A toll booth. Just symbolic. But legally sound. And as Karen would soon discover, it was about to cost her more than just her pride. The toll booth wasn't big. Just a simple wooden post with a hand-painted sign, but it stood tall and proud right at the bend in the path where Karen's ATV always emerged from the trees. We built it that morning after discovering the bunker and the emergency clause. Connor hammered the last nail while Nate drafted the printed notice that now hung beside the booth. Access to private land beyond this point requires permission from the owner. Unauthorized use will incur daily fines of $100, effective immediately. We even added a fake little security camera made from a broken GoPro and a piece of pipe just to sell the look. It wasn't about collecting actual money. It was about message and presence. Karen had played her games. This was ours. We didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, like clockwork, the familiar whine of Karen's ATV echoed through the woods. She slowed to a stop when she saw the booth, eyes narrowing behind oversized sunglasses. Her dog barked once, then immediately cowered when she turned and hissed, "Quiet." Karen stepped off the vehicle like she was descending a royal carriage and marched up to the sign. She read it once, twice, then turned to us where we stood at the fire pit, just watching. She pointed a trembling finger in the air. "You're not allowed to block my access to my own property." "That's the thing," Nate called back casually. "It's not your property. And the access road you've been using? That runs through our parcel. The one you're technically trespassing on every day." Karen's lips curled as she stormed toward us. "You're bluffing. You can't charge me to access my own home. That's extortion." "Not extortion," Nate said, holding up a copy of the old stewardship clause. "It's legal enforcement of land use. You've been given notice. You've refused to negotiate. Now the clock starts ticking. $100. Every day." Her eyes darted to me, then back to the toll booth. She looked around like maybe someone would jump out and say it was a prank. But no one came. This wasn't a joke. This was the forest pushing back. She screamed. Just let it out, like a teakettle of rage exploding into the woods. Then she stomped back to her ATV, kicked it into gear, and peeled away so fast she nearly hit a sapling. We didn't see her for the rest of the day. That night, around the fire, we couldn't stop laughing. It felt like a turning point, like we'd finally won some strange backwoods chess match. Nate toasted with a soda and said, Nothing like a little paperwork to turn chaos into order.